lot of people in here. It's so nice to see so many people come out. For Barry, Gail mentioned my name is Adam Cooper. I'm Barry Cooper's son. And of course, virtually everyone in here knew him as Barry, but a couple of us, my sister and myself, he was just Dad. So I thought I would share a few memories and perhaps some thoughts on how he influenced me growing up with all of you. Dad was a very gentle man. I remember growing up, he rarely spoke to us in anger or raised his voice at all. He was very, very calm, very easygoing, sometimes a little distant, but kind. And seemed to like a quiet house. I remember he was very enthusiastic talking about his hobbies, sports, or birding. Didn't always get the intense personal, emotional conversations with him, but that went both ways, at least not with me. But he always told us he loved us and was an affectionate father. I remember he would make us from time to time these English breakfasts on the weekends when my mom would sleep in, and fried tomatoes and eggs and sausages. That was always a treat. And when I was a little bit older, he introduced me to tennis, which was a hobby of his. I'll remember him driving me down Rockville Pike to Bradley's, if you remember that store, getting my first tennis racket, the cheapest one, of course, and going out to play with him. And he could be counted on every Christmas to reliably give me a couple cans of tennis balls wrapped up, invariably listed as coming from Bjorn Borg or Pete Sampras or someone like that. It was a hobby for him, but it became a great passion in my life, and I'm very grateful to him for having introduced me to it. And a few years later, he was my first teacher in teaching me how to drive, and he was always very patient and mellow as I learned to be comfortable behind the wheel.
Was he comfortable behind the wheel, though, when you were driving?
He could have a little bit of an impish side. He definitely had a sense of humor about him, too. He wasn't just a gentle soul. I have very strong memories being a child growing up with my sister, and he would pretend there was this big spider, big glossy black spider in our basement called Augie, who would come out and get us if we misbehaved. But whenever Augie did appear, it ended up being nothing more than Dad wriggling his fingers and then proceeding to tickle us. So it wasn't so bad, but I still kind of have a mental image of this spider between the washer and dryer in our half-finished basement. He also used to take great amusement in coming behind my sister or I me or my sister when we were like at the top of the stairs or near a ledge, and suddenly putting both hands on our shoulders with a "just saved you" or "just scared you," and that delighted him. Probably the best of these stories is kind of legendary in our family lore as the doll story. Really, my sister should tell it, but I'll give you my recollection. So there was this time we had a sleepover at our house. My sister did. A couple of her girlfriends. She was probably about 11 or 12. And they were staying up late and filled with that giggly tween girl energy. And I think my dad and I were mostly keeping our distance. And they had watched a movie called Child's Play, which I don't know if you remember this cinematic masterpiece, but it was about a malevolent doll that comes to life. Now, Claire, she had a doll that she played with years ago. It was an old toy amongst her other toys laying around. That was a big plastic doll of a girl, probably about 3 foot, certainly like toddler size. And over the course of the evening, these girls being who they were, they gradually became convinced this doll was possessed, and were just getting more and more riled up by this doll. At one point, my dad went out for a walk in the neighborhood, I think, to get some space, and they actually went across the street in search of a neighbor, like, "We need to know that this doll is okay, it's not out to get us." Eventually he came back, and everybody settled down and went to sleep. The next morning, I wake up to these high-pitched squeals with a bang. My sister Claire and her friends come running out of the room, launching out the front door. One of her friends actually went through the screen door and was hanging there, shrieking. And a moment later, my dad comes in from the back door, chuckling to himself, and he's carrying the doll. So what he had done was, while they were sleeping, is taken this doll, crept outside, and knelt under my sister's bedroom window, and then hoisted up and started banging on the window with the doll. So it looked like the doll was trying to get in. Now, when everybody found out, it was all relief and laughter, but he did have that wicked side.
It's traumatizing.
There's so many things I could say about Dad. Many years later, I had the pleasure of working with him in the same office at Signet Bank. That was one summer when I was in college. He was kind of near the end of his career, and I was starting mine. And it's special for me because it was really the last time we would see each other just routinely on a daily basis, just chatting and hanging out. When the other guys in the office would go out for Chinese food for lunch or Old Georgetown Grill, my dad and I would usually economize and walk over to the Safeway and just get a cup of soup and a roll and an apple. He was thrifty in those days, and that's something I think I learned from him, at least for a while. But of course, it's impossible to talk about my father without talking about bird watching. It was clear to me from an early age this was the great passion of his life, and it was something that was interesting to me about him when I was young. I mean, he was sort of a role model in terms of being quietly passionate about something, really putting all your eggs in one basket with an interest. And later on in my life, I think I took some of those lessons to heart in the sense that I think my father, he worked to live rather than living to work, as the saying goes. Your job, you should be conscientious at, you should show up for, but it's really a vehicle to pursue your interests. He would go out bird watching most weekends, and when I was about 8 or 9 years old, he would sometimes take me with him, sometimes my sister too. And it was kind of special at that age to wake up early on a weekend, in the pre-dawn darkness, quietly get your gear together, binoculars, sometimes a telescope, these leather bags. And I remember he had a metal thermos filled with coffee. I mean, this was in the days before everyone had water bottles and stuff all the time. And then we'd, trundle into the car and then go drive somewhere. It was never clear where we were going. It always seemed to take a long time. But I'd be warm in the car and kind of going in and out of being asleep and, blinking and yawning. And we drive somewhere and some parkland or green space. Usually just as the sun was coming up, we'd arrive and the birds would all be singing and we'd get out and walk around and look for them. And I have mixed feelings about it, if I'm being honest, because, I wanted his approval, and I think even more than that, his attention. But ultimately, bird watching didn't really take with me. I found it a little bit frustrating to go out for a walk into nature, get moving, and then have to stop and wait and look and wait and look for a particular bird. Sometimes you saw it, sometimes you didn't. Start walking again and then stop and repeat. But it did instill in me a great love of nature, which has persisted to this day. My dad was very good, it seemed to me, when I was a young boy, at hearing a bird call and then locating it visually in a tree or something like that. And I was terrible at this. It was like speaking a foreign language, so I had no patience for it. I remember one time being at Bombay Hook, this is on the Delaware Bay, with Dad and some other birders, this was in summer, looking out over a marshy area with telescopes at some seagulls or seabirds of some sort. I don't know what they were. And the sun is baking down, the sweat is pouring on my face, there's mosquitoes everywhere, and it felt like hours all to find the one seagull that looks just slightly different from all the seagulls, all the other ones. I didn't have, with bird watching anyway, that obsessive interest, but I always admired it. I always respected it. So the last memory I'll leave you with is from this period when my dad would take me out bird watching, and it's a very dear one to me. But he would sometimes take me and my sister to the banding station, which if you're not a birder, that's banding birds is when you put these little rings around their wrists, you track their population, their migratory patterns, that kind of thing. And it would be another case where we would get up early and get into the car and drive off somewhere. You know, I don't know where this place was. I don't know what the organization was, but I don't want to know because this is kind of not because I disrespect it, but this is like a mythological memory for me, you know? And we'd get to the area where the banding station was, and you know, it'd usually be in the autumn. I guess that's when birds migrate, and you know, it'd be the grass would be dewy, it'd be a little chilly, and we'd walk along some shaggy meadows or fields down to a little forested area and put up these long nets. And any birds flying low would fly into the nets. They wouldn't get hurt. They would get, you know, tangled in there. And then a little while later, my dad and the other birders would come around, very gently, carefully untangle the birds, wrap them in little cloths, put them in bags, and then head back to the banding station, which was really more or less a cabin with a covered patio. There was a table, a nice big ledger, pencils, a scale. And they would, you know, identify the birds, band them, and weigh them, and then we'd let them go free. And that last job sometimes got to be my job. And I'll never forget what it felt like, you know, being a child and holding this little bird, this little creature, you know, in a cloth with just its head sticking out or its feet, slowly unrolling it until it fell into my hand, and it felt like it weighed nothing, but you could feel the softness of the feathers and the warmth and the little heart going pitter-pat. And I suppose they were a bit stunned because they would often just stay there for a moment or two before flying away. But in those moments, I really fell in love with them, and I wonder if that's something like my father felt before they flew away, and I'll always be grateful for that experience. And I think there's a lesson in there somewhere about sometimes the best way to appreciate something you love is just to let it go. Thank you very much.